Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket, and I'm revved up. I'm ready to go today. It's going to be a great day. I get to see my mom tonight for the first time since Christmas. Can't wait for that. Have an outstanding show coming your way. Tony East scheduled to join me at 11:20, as he always does on Wednesdays. And it's a great day to have Tony join because the Indiana Fever play tonight. The Indiana Fever will take on the Washington Mystics, the terrible 2-12 Washington Mystics, tonight at 7 o'clock at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. The Fever are favored by 4.5 points tonight, which feels like too small of a line. Fever are kind of starting to figure it out, especially on the offensive end in these past couple of games. Aaliyah Boston, the WNBA Player of the Week, she's started to live up to the expectations that were set for her going into this season. Caitlin Clark is up and down, but she's still impactful with her passing. Kelsey Mitchell's a bucket. I love watching her play. She is so good off the bounce. And I know that people love Caitlin Clark, and rightfully so. But for me, when Kelsey Mitchell has the ball, I perk up in a similar fashion to when Caitlin Clark has the ball. Okay, Mitchell is electric with the ball in her hand. She creates space for herself and creates shots for herself at a high level. And when she plays well, she takes so much pressure off of Caitlin Clark. It is nice to have another player that can bring the ball up and initiate the offense, or even just create a shot for herself. And Kelsey Mitchell is more than capable of doing that, and we've seen her do that in spurts this season. Now, why do I bring up Kelsey Mitchell? Right? Obviously, I'm going to bring up Caitlin Clark whenever we talk about the Fever, because, you know, she's the most entertaining athlete playing right now. But the reason why I bring them both up is because they played great the last time the Fever played the Mystic. Caitlin Clark had arguably her best game of the year, scored 30 points on 8 of 15 shooting, 7 of 13 from 3. She had 6 assists on top of that, 8 rebounds, 4 steals. Only downside is the same downside that we continue to see when Caitlin Clark takes the floor. She had 8 turnovers the last time they played the Mystic, which is not okay. That's still something that needs to be fixed. And I keep bringing up the turnovers, and I will continue to do so because I don't want to sound like a fanboy. Like I listen to other people talk about her, and all the haters only discuss the turnovers, and all the people that love her refuse to discuss them. And at some point, those turnovers that Caitlin Clark continues to commit are going to cost the Fever. They probably already have in separate games throughout this year. So that's still part of her game that needs to be cleaned up. Once again, as I say every time I bring this up, I'm not worried about it because she's a good player who's still adjusting to the speed of the game. And I really think that, you know, the month off that she gets during the Olympics is going to be huge for her in terms of just helping her relax, because I think we talk so much about the physical side of things whenever we talk about players getting rest, but like mental rest is a real thing as well. And that's why Kelsey Mitchell is such a big deal, right? When we look back at the last time that the Fever played the Mystic, Kelsey Mitchell scored 16 points on 6 of 13 shooting from the floor and 3 of 6 from 3. On nights where Aaliyah Boston or Caitlin Clark struggle, she is more than capable of stepping up and kind of filling that number 2 scoring option role. That's what she did the last time they played the Mystic. Aaliyah Boston struggled. She only scored 10 points and was 3 of 9 from the field. But because of Kelsey Mitchell and her ability to score the basketball and step up in those games where Aaliyah Boston or Caitlin Clark struggle, they were able to win. Mitchell's scoring ability as the third option, I believe, is a real advantage for the Fever. And when all 3 of the Fever's young, talented players are scoring, they are so tough to beat. When you go back and you watch the game on Sunday against the Chicago Sky, that's what happened. All 3 of them, Kelsey Mitchell, Caitlin Clark, and Aaliyah Boston, all 3 had it going, and the Fever offense felt nearly unstoppable when that was happening. Now, looking at tonight, the Mystic are not they're not a good team. Good teams don't start the season 2-12. That doesn't happen. They are awful. Yes, they've been in close games and they've lost. It tells me that they don't have a go-to player down the stretch that can kind of push them over the top. Because of that, the Indiana Fever have a great chance to improve to 6-10 on the season. That put them on a 3-game winning streak, which would be their first winning streak of the year. If they win tonight, they'll have won 4 out of their last 5 games. They'd also improve to 4-1 in this important 9-game stretch that they're in. They'd also be 6-4 when they don't play one of the 2 best teams in the league, the Sun or the Liberty. Like, that's solid for a young team. I would say that is meeting expectations. If they can continue to find ways to beat the bottom half of the league, then they should continue to make the playoffs, and they should continue to be a major story as we head into these summer months. The expectation set for the Fever before the season started by Lynn Dunn, the general manager, was for them to compete for the 8 seed and to make the playoffs. That looks very attainable as of right now, and hopefully it is, because I want more playoff basketball here in Indianapolis. Now, Caitlin Clark has taken the world by storm. Okay, if you had asked me, 6 years ago when I was in college and I decided that I wanted to do this radio thing, if you would ask me, hey, Jonathan, do you ever think that you'll ever open a show talking about the WNBA? I said, there's not a chance because people don't care about it. And then along comes Caitlin Clark, and she takes the world by storm. And at first, I was going to say the sports world, but everyone is talking about her. She is a content machine. All she does is churn out content for everyone. If you want to talk about her from a sports perspective, there's plenty of things within her game that you can talk about. If you want to discuss Caitlin Clark and have a race conversation, you can do that too. If you want to talk about her from a marketing standpoint and what the WNBA is doing wrong and what marketing teams should do instead, you can do that as well. If you want to get really political about Caitlin Clark, you can do that as well. She is just a full-blown content machine that continues to churn out topics for people like me and for you and your buddies to talk about. That's what she does. My question is, how long does this last for? How long can Caitlin Clark hold our attention? A lot of people are going to tune in to her game tonight because she's so much fun to watch. I'm of the opinion, when it comes to answering this question of how long can Caitlin Clark hold our attention, I'm of the opinion that on August 26th, people will begin to check out of this Caitlin Clark saga. Then on September 5th at 8:20, people won't care anymore until next summer when Caitlin Clark starts her second season in the WNBA. Jonathan, why those 2 days? Why August 26th and September 5th? That's the start of football season. Nothing draws more eyes than the NFL. And as great as Caitlin Clark is, there is not a world where a women's professional basketball player is a bigger story and is more talked about than the start of the NFL season. With that being said, how much more of this nonstop Caitlin Clark news cycle can people take? Here's the thing, that just looking back over my notes and just kind of how I've gone about doing shows and looking at, places like, ESPN and Fox Sports and all this. As much as Caitlin Clark has been covered, we have been able to take a break from her because the NBA playoffs have been going on and OTAs happened last week. And the NHL Stanley Cup final is going on right now, right? And then during her college season when she was awesome, we were able to step away from her greatness and talk about men's college basketball. We were able to talk about Zach Edey and UConn and how terrible IU was and all those things. None of that is going on right now. And we have a month until the start of NFL training camp. If you thought that the Caitlin Clark segments were everywhere, you just wait. The WNBA is the only thing going on right now. Yes, Major League Baseball's happening, but Let's be honest. People don't care about baseball until the playoffs start. Most people aren't tuning in to game 90 of a 162 game season, especially when the Cubs are as bad as they are. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't care to sit down on my couch and watch the Cubs blow another save. Just not for me. And so because of that, people are going to continue to be tuned in to Caitlin Clark like they honestly never have been before, because she's the only entertaining athlete available to us to watch right now. And now this should be a great thing. Like, this should be a fun, exciting, awesome day, awesome time for the WNBA. But, we've all sat back. We've watched how the WNBA players and the organization as a whole has handled this. And I think it's fair to say that the WNBA is probably going to get in its own way at some point. While the things that Angel Reese has said about Caitlin Clark have made the news, now everything that could even be perceived as a slight jab at Caitlin Clark is going to make the news, and it's going to be talked about. I said about a month ago now that Caitlin Clark is the most polarizing athlete that we've seen since Tim Tebow. I still believe that. And places like ESPN and Fox Sports know that. That's why they continue to cover her like crazy people. Okay? That means that more Caitlin Clark content is coming because, once again, she's the only entertaining athlete available to us right now. And if it's negative and it's not about basketball, the WNBA's window of opportunity to capitalize on Caitlin Clark's rookie season could close sooner than August 26th and September 5th at 8:20. Okay? Like, there is going to come a point where people get sick and tired of how political the conversation around Caitlin Clark is and can be. Like, whenever I discuss Caitlin Clark, I feel like I am tiptoeing on this line of not talking about race, because let's be honest, since I am Indianapolis's honesty broker, like, race has been brought into this by other WNBA players. And people, sports fans, do not like it when their politics and their sports mix. Sports and politics are like oil and water. They don't mix. You can shake them up and stir them around and do whatever you want to it. It's not going to mix, and people don't want them to. Okay, like, I used to produce a radio show at a conservative radio station here in Indy. Oh, geez, I wonder which one. And when the host would start talking about sports, it was the worst thing ever. Politics in sports taint the very thing that I love and that you likely love, because chances are you wouldn't be listening to a sports radio show if you didn't also love sports. Okay, when leagues allow their sport to cross into this realm of politics, it never ends well. Remember when the NBA put BLM stuff on the court and they let guys put different things on their jersey? It crushed their ratings. Okay, the NBA Finals this year between the Celtics and the Mavericks had bad ratings. But guess what? Those ratings were not as bad as when they put BLM on the court. That was the bubble year when everybody was at home during COVID. The NBA had LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals, the two biggest brands in the sport, and no one watched. Despite it being COVID and everyone being stuck inside with nothing to do, people were binge watching shows left and right. People were on their couches, glued to their TVs because they didn't have anything else to do. Like, the 2020 bubble year should have been the highest rated NBA finals in history because everybody was inside. Nobody was out and about doing anything. The NBA had their biggest star since Michael Jordan playing in the finals in a Lakers jersey, but no one watched because they allowed politics to infiltrate their sport. The consumers clearly do not like it, and so they didn't watch. The WNBA has to be careful because their window of opportunity of capitalizing on Caitlin Clark's rookie season is slowly closing. Okay, August 26th and September 5th. That's when it will officially close. Okay? They've got this short window of opportunity to really capitalize on Caitlin Clark's rookie season. And if they allow politics to seep into the cracks of that conversation and into the cracks of their league, people will be so delighted with opportunities to tune out. Great show in store for you today. Tony East joining me at 11:20. Can't wait for that. Having him on the air is always a great time. I'm going to wrap up the NBA season. Going to talk a little bit about next season. Pascal Siakam signed a 4-year deal. Max deal. I've got some Colts stuff. Just a lot of things to cover today. And I'm going to get into the Boston Celtics and the next NBA season when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Make sure you head over to YouTube, subscribe to Indy Sports Ticket, and tune into the live stream. Join what I would say is a fantastic chat room. It's a great time. If you're looking for community, we have it here at Indy's Sports Ticket, and it's great. So head over to YouTube, subscribe there, join the chat, give us your thoughts because we want them. And I meant to open the show, or in the opening segment, I meant to mention the death of baseball legend Willie Mays, dead at 93, passed away yesterday. Just one of the best players ever. Oftentimes I think when we talk about the greats of Major League Baseball, especially from that older era in like the 50s, for some reason he never gets mentioned. Maybe I just don't have enough conversations about the 50s in Major League Baseball, but he's one of the best players ever. Okay, he was the 1954 National League MVP, won the World Series that year. That was the same year that he made one of the most just insane plays ever. The over-the-head basket catch at Polo Grounds, just running the thing down. It's an incredible play. And, look, Willie was a 2-time MVP. He was a 24-time All-Star, even though he played 22 seasons. Not sure how that works, but that's what happened. He was a 12-time Gold Glove winner, which is absurd. In 2015, he was selected as one of the game's greatest living players. Was a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I mean, just an all-time guy, served in the military on top of everything else. He's 5th all-time in wins above replacement at 156.2. It's just absurd. The 4 players in front of him, Barry Bonds, Cy Young, Walter Johnson, and Babe Ruth. He's on this list of players that's probably longer than I realize, of legends that I would love to have seen play. And he is a legend. Like, that's a word that gets used very loosely. We call everyone a legend whenever they pass away or whenever they retire. But Willie Mays meets every criteria to be described as a legend, because that's what he is. And this Boston Celtics team is they have some legendary status just with how amazing they were this year. And as of today, like, they are plus 300 to repeat as champions, which is insane. And so John Buzzard, who, I called Caitlin Clark a content machine earlier. John Buzzard, friend of the radio show, he is as well. He tweets me ideas and things all the time. I can't remember if he said it in the YouTube chat yesterday or if he tweeted at me. He mentioned that I should do a list of like the 5 best teams that could potentially dethrone the Boston Celtics next year. And I was like, you know what? That's a great idea. I'm going to do that tomorrow. And I believe that the team that can be capable, I'm going to say will be, because it's really hard to repeat in the NBA now. There's so much talent. Players are getting better every single year. So the team that is going to dethrone the Celtics next season has to be able to score the basketball. That is the most important thing. And you have to be able to do it at a high level. And when we watched the NBA Finals, that was the Dallas Mavericks' downfall. They didn't have enough offense to overcome this amazing Boston Celtics defense. And when we look at the Celtics, and I mentioned this yesterday, they're bringing everybody back. The Celtics are again going to have multiple offensive options next year, and they are once again going to be one of the best defenses in the NBA. Just depth on depth on depth. Once again, Brad Stevens has done just an incredible job. And in order to beat the Celtics in a 7-game series, then you better be able to put the ball in the bucket consistently, because that defense is going to be great. And we know that Boston is more than capable of going crazy. They had the most efficient offense in the history of the NBA this last season. Okay, with that being said, here are the 5 teams most likely to dethrone the Boston Celtics next year. I've got 2 teams in the Western Conference, followed by 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. So we're going to start out in the West. The Nuggets, they have to be on this list. While the Boston Celtics are plus 300 to win the title next year, the Nuggets are second at plus 750. They have the best player in the world. Let's just start there. Nikola Jokic is a one-man offense who's a better defender than people realize. Fun fact, if you're 7 feet tall, weigh like 280 pounds, and you're just in the right spot, you can have an impact on the defensive end of the ball. And that allows the Nuggets to get stops on the defensive end of the floor. Jokic, also a great rebounder. This isn't a Jokic thing, so I'm going to stop there. Offensively, the Nuggets generate good shots better than anyone in the league. They do. Okay, the Nuggets and the Celtics are the two best teams at creating open looks. They do it more than any other team in the NBA. And in order to beat the Boston Celtics, you have to be able to generate open looks, not off of one ball-centric player. That was another thing that the Mavs ran into because, once again, the Boston Celtics are a great defensive team. Like, they can guard the ball better than any other team in the league, and that gave Dallas a lot of issues. When we look at the Nuggets, first and foremost, the Celtics don't have anyone that can guard Jokic. So if they want to run one-on-one stuff with him, they are more than capable of doing that. But they move the ball really well. And you have to do that to get this great Celtics defensive team to move and rotate. So I like the Nuggets. If they were to meet in the finals, like, you would have to like the Nuggets matchup against Boston. Next, the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder are the off-brand version of the Boston Celtics. They are the great value brand. That's what they are. They have two dynamic shot creators in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams. They are the Celtics versions of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Like the Celtics, the Oklahoma City Thunder have so many capable offensive players. Everyone that they put on the floor, minus Josh Giddey, can dribble, pass, and shoot. And Josh Giddey's an excellent ball handler, and he's a great passer. He just can't shoot. And when we look back at their series against the Mavericks, they just went cold. They played Giddey too much. That allowed Dallas to kind of play a funky defense and all those things. They're also inexperienced this year, and experience really matters in the playoffs. That's one of the biggest things that we've learned this year. And with a year of playoff experience under their belts, they should be better this next year. And when we look at Boston defensively on top of, when we look at the Thunder defensively on top of everything else, like the Boston Celtics, they don't have to hide anybody. Everybody on the floor that the Thunder put out there can guard. And Chet Holmgren, despite being, 7 feet tall and weighing less than me, he can protect the rim. He did a great job of it in his rookie season doing that. So the Thunder have to be on this list. Moving into the Eastern Conference now, we have to put the Pacers on here. The Pacers have to be mentioned in this, despite them getting swept by the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. We watched all those games. I know I did. I'm assuming that you did as well. The Pacers could have won 3 out of the 4, but their inexperience cost them in those games. Okay, the Celtics closed games and made the big plays that the Pacers didn't. That could happen again next year. It could also not happen again next year. The Pacers are going to be a better basketball team next season, especially since Pascal Siakam is going to be here. You can check off the number one thing on the to-do list for the Pacers offseason, which was re-signing Pascal Siakam. Woj of ESPN reported earlier this morning that Siakam is set to sign a 4-year max extension at $189.5 million total. That's a little over $47 million a year. Pascal Siakam worth every penny of it. Okay, the Pacers won every minute in the playoffs that both Siakam and Halliburton were on the floor, even the minutes against Boston. So he fits in well. They got to find a way to improve defensively. I think everyone that's watched the Pacers this year knows that. I hope that their improvements defensively come in the form of Jarris Walker playing 25 minutes a night. We'll see. We'll see if he develops the way that the Pacers want him to in the summer. And then we'll have to see what Rick Carlisle does, because once again, this Pacers team is deep. They have a lot of good players. And hopefully Jarris Walker will see him crack into the rotation this next year, because he's a guy that could really have an impact on the defensive end of the floor. Next, the Bucks, which may come as a surprise. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to be better next season. They are. Damian Lillard has played with these guys for a year now. That's important. Damian Lillard should show up in shape. Unlike this year, Doc Rivers said on the Bill Simmons podcast earlier this week, I think he said, or maybe it was last week. It wasn't that long ago. Doc Rivers basically said that Damian Lillard didn't work out all summer. Okay, Dame knew that he was going to be traded. The last thing he wanted to do was to get hurt while working out. So, because I believe that if you're hurt, they can't trade you. That's kind of how that rule works. So, Damian Lillard didn't work out all summer. And the other thing that I think is going to help Milwaukee next year is they aren't going to hire a coach in the middle of the season. And Doc Rivers is going to get to bring in his assistant coaches. All of those things point to the Bucks being better. There's going to be a lack of chaos around the team, which is important. They also shouldn't suffer as many injuries next year as they did this year. They had bad injury luck. Like, it's going to be hard for them to have Giannis miss an entire playoff series and for Damian Lillard to strain his Achilles in the middle of a playoff series. They should be healthier next season. And like how the Celtics will have no answer for Nikola Jokic, they aren't going to have an answer for Giannis either because nobody does. So the Bucks should be better. They are undoubtedly a team that could beat the Celtics next year in a 7-game series. Finally on this list, I really teetered back and forth between putting the Knicks on here, who's who I ended up choosing, and the Orlando Magic. So let's start with the Knicks, and then I'll explain my Magic logic. The Knicks would also give the Celtics a lot of trouble just because of how well they defend. If they're able to bring OG Anunoby back next year, there's some questions there. Can't wait to have Tony East on at 11:20 to talk to him about those things. If they bring him back next year, they would be a tough out for the Celtics just because of how good they are defensively. We know they're going to rebound, and we all know that Tom Thibodeau is also one of the better coaches in the NBA. Like, he would have the Knicks ready, and they would be tough. We all know that. The reason why I picked them as the fifth team instead of the Orlando Magic is because Jalen Brunson's awesome, and he's going to come back better next year. And Julius Randle should hopefully be healthy, and they're going to look to add another piece. And that's kind of the question around the Magic is I really love Paolo Banchero. I think he's a great player. But Franz Wagner, up and down, they need kind of a second ball handler that can really score. If they can add that, especially if it's Paul George, then I would really like the Orlando Magic going forward. So those are the 5 teams that I would pick to dethrone the Boston Celtics this next season. Nuggets, Thunder, Pacers, Bucks, or the Knicks, and then in parentheses put the Orlando Magic if they're able to make a big move. Another big move that was made today. Pascal Siakam gets paid 4 years, $189.5 million contract. No player option, no team option, just a straight up when these 4 years are over, you're done, which that's probably how it should be given Siakam's age. Another team making a very important move, something that should have happened a while ago. Monty Williams fired in Detroit. It's about time. He should have been fired in the middle of the season. Okay, as soon as it was pretty evident that he wanted to play Killian Hayes over Jaden Ivey, the number 5 overall pick who's shown some flashes of being a good player at some point. As soon as he opted to do that, he should have been fired immediately. But the Detroit Pistons, they opted to hire a new president of basketball operations. Okay, and he sat back. He was like, nah, bro, this guy isn't it. We can't have Monty Williams here in Detroit anymore. So they fired him. You know, they still got to pay him a lot of money. And the fact that they hired him in the first place is nuts. And the fact that they paid him as much as they did is even more nuts. Okay, like, yes, he had a couple good seasons in Phoenix. But let's be really honest about what happened in Phoenix. They weren't good until Chris Paul showed up, who's basically another coach. And then as soon as he got old and all those things, I mean, geez, as soon as he got old, man, the Suns went downhill. Otter Creek, great question. He said, using that logic, why should Rick Carlisle not be fired? The number 8 pick doesn't even play at all. How about because the Indiana Pacers made the Eastern Conference Finals and the Detroit Pistons didn't even win 15 games this year and set the record for the longest losing streak in the history of the NBA on top of everything else. Okay, if you don't want to play a young guy, that's fine. I get it. There are plenty of guys who get drafted, from that, 7 and beyond range, really, that spend time in the G League. But if you're not going to play them, then you better be good. You better be good. And the Pacers were, and the Detroit Pistons were they were the worst. They were by far the worst team in the league this year. So, Pistons, good job. I have no idea who you're going to hire. Why you fired your head coach 8 days before the NBA draft doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You could have made this decision, a month ago, and you actually would have had an opportunity to hire a good head coach. We're going to see what winds up happening. Monty Williams, though, out in Detroit. When we come back here in a few minutes, hopefully Chris Ballard will be out sooner rather than later. But he, some news has come out about the Colts, and it's not all bad. It's not all bad. Colts conversation coming up here in about 4 minutes.
More winners, more often. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Tickets. Wrapping up hour number 1. Talked a little Fever. Of course, I had to talk a little Caitlin Clark on top of things as well. Talked a little NBA hoops. Moving now into the Indianapolis Colts, because I'm getting really out here, guys. I don't know what I'm about to say. Did Chris Ballard potentially tell the truth? Did that happen? Did that actually happen? It came out earlier this week. Maybe it was late last week. I don't remember. That the Colts turned down a potential NFL draft night trade with the Los Angeles Rams to draft Laiatu Latu. Now, look, the Rams are one of the best ran teams in the league. It seems like every time they make a decision, I find myself sitting down saying that was a great decision. And it's to a point where it's like whenever the Rams offer me a trade, like the antenna would have to go up. Okay, why are they doing this? Like, I know that this team has ran well. They're smart. They are consistently in the mix, minus the year after they won the Super Bowl. And we know the Rams are ultra aggressive. It's almost like being aggressive wins in sports. Who would ever have thought that? I don't know. But the Rams reach out. They make this trade. The Rams offer the Colts the 19th pick and a couple other picks in exchange to trade up to the 15th pick. And Chris Ballard said no. This is legitimately a big deal because, as we all know, Chris Ballard never misses out on a chance to trade down and accumulate some more 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. That's his favorite thing. It's his favorite thing to do. So this means that they legitimately liked Laiatu Latu. Like, if they didn't love him as much as they claimed to have loved him after the draft, they very easily, they could have traded down to 19 and taken a cornerback or taken Dallas Turner or taken an offensive lineman, maybe another offensive guard, who knows. Instead, they opted to stay put and draft Laiatu Latu. For most teams, this would not be a big deal. For most teams, they'd be like, yeah, we made a good decision. Like, right? Like, that usually not a big deal. But as I said, we all know how much Chris Ballard loves, desires, and looks for opportunities to trade down and accumulate more draft picks. He didn't do that here, though. And as we all know, Chris Ballard is famous for saying that he loves whoever they pick. They could have the last pick of the draft, and he would rant and rave about how great they are. And somewhere in there, he would say, I can't believe this guy was still on the board. Right? That's what he does. And, like, could it actually be true this time? Like, could Chris Ballard actually be telling the truth when it comes to Laiatu Latu? Like, does he actually believe that Latu shouldn't have been available at 15? Was he legitimately surprised that he was still on the board? Might be true this time. And I hope and pray that it is. Oh, I really hope that it is. Okay, minicamp for the Colts starts on July 24th. So we are about a month away. It starts for both rookies and veterans. Some teams will opt to have rookies report a few days early. The Colts aren't doing that, which I find interesting, especially since Latu is going to play a role early and AD Mitchell is going to play a decently sized role early. It would make sense to me to have the rookies report early because there's a decent chance that some of these guys are actually going to have opportunities to contribute in year one. They aren't just going to be backups. They aren't just going to be practice players. Like, Latu is going to start from day one. Adonai Mitchell is going to start from day one. Don't give me any of this, but Alec Pierce crap, okay? I think it's established. Alec Pierce, even if he's not a quote-unquote bust, he definitely hasn't lived up to the expectations that were set when he was drafted in the second round 3 years ago. Okay. So because they have these two rookies that I think we all undoubtedly know are going to play, for me, it would make sense to have them show up early. The Colts aren't doing that. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to read in between the lines a little bit. They had, rookie mini camp, rookie OTAs earlier this month, right? And I feel like if the rookies had struggled in any way, they would have had them report early. For example, if A.D. Mitchell was struggling with the installation of the offense, if A.D. Mitchell was struggling with understanding the route concepts that Shane Steichen likes to run, right? If there was any sense of like he clearly doesn't have a full grasp on what we're doing here, then I feel like the Colts would have had the rookies come in early. If Laiatu Latu was struggling with understanding the defensive scheme that Gus Bradley is running, like many of us do, we often sit around and we're like, why is Gus Bradley doing this? Then I feel like they would have had the rookies come in early, but that is not what they decided to do. They aren't doing that. Now, maybe I'm reading into things too much. They didn't have the rookies report early last year either, right? This might just be a Shane Steichen thing where he doesn't like having the rookies report early for whatever reason, but it's June. We got like 2.5 months. Oh, we're 2.5 months away. Oh, that's the best. Like 2.5 months away from the start of football season. And it's nice to be optimistic during this time of the year. It just is. Like I want to hope and think positively about the Colts. I do. Okay, that's why, I'm asking the question, did Chris Ballard actually tell the truth when it comes to Laiatu Latu? Did he? I don't know. I hope that he did. I hope he's an absolute beast. I hope he was truthfully surprised that he was still available at 15 where they picked him. And I think that the fact that they turned down an opportunity to trade down to 19 and pick up some other picks, I think that it speaks to that. I really think that it does. And I'm excited for A.D. Mitchell. I think Shane Steichen is going to do awesome things with him. Okay? Like, let's be honest. The Colts had a near top 10 offense in the NFL last year. From a points per game perspective, they were 11th, so they were just outside the top 10. They had the 11th best offense in the league in terms of production, with a backup quarterback, a guy in Gardner Minshew, who is a career backup, a guy in Gardner Minshew who potentially could be the backup quarterback to Aiden O'Connell this year, who was fine at Purdue. I thought he was fine for Las Vegas this year. But if Gardner Minshew goes to Las Vegas and he's the backup to Aiden O'Connell, I think that'll very much put in perspective how good of a quarterback Gardner Minshew is. He's one of the better backups in the league, but that's what he is. Gardner Minshew is a backup. So with a backup quarterback, taking every snap this year, except for the 12 quarters that Anthony Richardson played, Shane Steichen was able to create an offense that was 11th in scoring in the NFL last year. That is impressive. Let's throw in the fact that Michael Pittman Jr., who is a fine player, he's a good wide receiver. Let's throw in the fact that he was their best receiver. Let's throw in the fact that Jonathan Taylor missed 7 games last year, if I remember correctly. So Michael Pittman Jr. is your best weapon. The best player on your offense, Jonathan Taylor, doesn't play 7 games out of the year. And your second best receiver is a slot guy in Josh Downs, who I really like, but isn't a game changer. So with a lack of offensive weapons, a lack of talent at quarterback, and your best player not playing 7 out of the 17 games this year, Shane Steichen was able to create an offense that produced. Seriously, like that is what he did with, once again, a lack of talent on the offensive side of the football. More importantly, a lack of speed on the offensive side of the football. And this new element of the offense, this guy in A.D. Mitchell, who ran a 4.3 40 and is long and is big, bringing a guy like that in, even if he doesn't put up monster numbers, okay, even if A.D. Mitchell finishes the year and he only catches, like 45 balls for, 500 yards, his presence on the field will change things for the Colts in a positive manner. Okay? The toughest thing about having Tyreek Hill on your team is you have to play two high safeties because he can just run by everybody. And AD Mitchell is a 4-3 guy. Now he's not Tyreek Hill. It's not what I'm saying. Let me be clear on that. There's only one guy like that. I find it funny every year that, in the NBA draft or the NFL draft, we compare guys to like all-time greats. Like every single year there's a wide receiver and it's usually just a small, fast guy where they're like, this is the next Tyreek Hill. There is not a next Tyreek Hill. Okay. So let me just say that. But actually having legitimate speed on the field at the wide receiver spot for the Colts is going to make things easier on Shane Steichen because now you can't creep your safeties down and have them play 10 yards away from the ball. Like there's going to be more space on the field for Anthony Richardson to throw to, which is going to free up Michael Pittman Jr. on those, short to intermediate routes, a place where, Michael Pittman Jr. caught the majority of his balls last year. It's going to free up space for Josh Downs to kind of work in a similar area. And then from time to time, they'll be able to find AD Mitchell over the top. And also, making those safeties play further away from the line of scrimmage opens up opportunities for Jonathan Taylor to really run the football. Okay? Like when the safeties are 15 yards away from the line of scrimmage as opposed to 10, big deal. Like that, it just creates more space. So having AD Mitchell is going to be a real asset for Shane Steichen. When they drafted him, the videos, Shane Steichen is clearly pleased that is the guy that they took because they needed speed on the outside, and now they have it. And since apparently playing in the NFL is easier than college football, Anthony Richardson should be pretty good this year. MVP season incoming, no doubt about it. Not really. That is obviously the ultimate question. How does Anthony Richardson look this year? Because if he's the guy that everybody keeps saying that he is, then they should be fine. They should have plenty of opportunities to score points, and I think that's what we want. Like, we want to see an offense that really clicks because you don't spend the number 4 overall pick on a quarterback to have an average offense. If you spend the number 4 overall pick on a quarterback, they better be awesome. And I think that is what people are expecting from Anthony Richardson this year in year 2. Bringing in a guy like AD Mitchell. You don't do that to have a boring, middle of the road offense. You do that to be explosive and to score a lot of points. That's where major draft picks have been spent these last 2 years. And people want to see the fruit of that. That's what people want to see. And when it comes to AD Mitchell and it comes to Anthony Richardson, a lot of the success of the offense is going to be put on those two guys. Like if Anthony Richardson is the guy that everybody keeps saying that he is, then this could be an offense that goes from being, 11th best in the league to 6th or 7th. And if AD Mitchell is the guy that everybody hopes that he's going to be, we haven't seen him play in an NFL game yet. So excuse me if I'm getting ahead of myself. But if AD Mitchell ends up being a dynamic impact type of wide receiver, then this could be one of the best offenses in the NFL, because I know people for some reason don't seem to really like Shane Steichen. I thought he did a good job last year. If Gardner Minshew makes a throw, then they're in the playoffs. They win the division in year 1. Okay? Like, this is a guy in Shane Steichen who elevated Jalen Hurts, a guy who looked like he was going to be pretty average. Shane Steichen shows up, and all of a sudden, he's like competing for MVPs, and they're in the Super Bowl. Shane Steichen, like him, don't like him, whatever. The track record that we've seen from him in the NFL speaks for itself. And he's going to put this offense in a consistently good spot to get things done. Hour number 1 here on The Real Jonathan Smith Show wrapped up. Hour number 2 coming your way next. Tony East set to join me at 11:20. Cannot wait to have him on. Pascal Siakam signed a major extension today. We're definitely going to talk about that. We're going to touch on Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. They play again tonight. Talking about that when we come back here in about 5 minutes.
Today, my new son and I failed to shoot off a rocket
The rocket launched into the air.
and then crashed into the pond.
I'll never forget that day.
I'll never forget that day, even if I tried.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are. For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket, hour number 2. Great first hour. Just the best first hour? A great first hour? Great. The best. I don't know. It was good. I had a good time. I hope you guys did as well. I'm having a great day. I woke up this morning. I went on a run. It was really nice. My mom, she's in town. Cannot wait to see her tonight. Haven't seen her since Christmas, so I'm juiced up. I'm ready to go. I'm very excited to see my mom. But something I'm not excited to talk about is the passing of baseball legend Willie Mays. He passed away yesterday at the age of 93. Just really sad, right? Like, this is one of the best baseball players ever in the history of baseball. Won, the National League MVP in 1954. It's the same year that the Giants won the World Series with him in center field, where he makes one of the best catches ever, right? He makes the catch in deep center field of the Polo Grounds, the over-the-shoulder looking up basket catch, turn around, fire it in. I mean, he was awesome. And look, he was a 2-time National League MVP. He was a 24-time All-Star. He's a 12-time Gold Glove winner. In 2015, he was selected as one of the greatest living players at that time. He was a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He served in the military, and he was awesome. He lived a very full life, it seems like. And, baseball was obviously a large part of that. He's 5th all time in WAR at 156.2. That's insane. For reference, the 4 players in front of him are Barry Bonds, Cy Young, Walter Johnson, and of course, Babe Ruth. So, he's on the list of players that is longer than I would like to admit, but he's on the list of guys that I would have just loved to have seen play baseball. Yeah. So he's a legend. It's a word that gets thrown out all the time now. Whenever anyone dies or retires, they're immediately labeled a legend. It's not true for all of them, but Willie Mays meets every criteria to be described as the word legend. So with that being said, let's move to Caitlin Clark, because she is a legend. She's going to be. She's legendary as of right now. She's all that people seem to be able to talk about. The Indiana Fever taking on the Washington Mystics tonight at 7 o'clock at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So the Fever favored by 4.5 tonight. Take it. That feels really low. Okay, it feels like too small of a line. The Fever are starting to figure it out, and it's exciting, right? Like, the offensive end of the floor is really starting to come together. Aaliyah Boston has started living up to expectations. Caitlin Clark is up and down, but she's impactful with her passing. Kelsey Mitchell as well. She's awesome. I love watching her play. I perk up in a very similar fashion to when Kelsey Mitchell catches the ball as when I do when Caitlin Clark has the ball, right? Like, she's a really good player. I like her. Mitchell, electric with the ball in her hands. She's played well this year, averaging 15.5 points a game. That is second on the Indiana Fever, behind only Caitlin Clark. Kelsey Mitchell, very capable scorer. I enjoy watching her play. She's one of the better third options in the WNBA. To be fair, my NBA knowledge, very limited. That's why I've got Tony East coming on here in about 15 minutes. I'm going to ask him that, actually. And the reason why I say that she's a great third option is because of her skill with the ball. When Kelsey Mitchell plays with the ball in her hands more, she takes so much pressure off of Caitlin Clark. It is nice to have another guard that can bring the ball up, that can run offense, that can get a shot for themselves or for someone else. And Kelsey Mitchell is capable of doing all of those things. Now, why do I bring up Kelsey Mitchell? Why do I bring up Caitlin Clark? I think that the answer to that question is pretty easy. But the reason in this context why I bring them up is because they both played great the last time that they played the Mystic. Caitlin Clark had arguably her best game of the year. Scored 30 points, 8 of 15 shooting from the floor, 7 of 13 from 3, which is just absurd. That is Steph Curry-like. It is. On top of that, 6 assists, 8 rebounds, 4 steals as well. Only downside with Clark's game against the Mystic last time is the same downside in every game that she plays. She turned the basketball over 8 times. And that's just not okay from your starting point guard. And I'm going to continue to bring up the turnovers because I don't want to sound like a fanboy. And it's also just a really large part of the Fever right now. And it's just a large part of who Caitlin Clark has been as a pro. She's been careless with the basketball. And these turnovers are going to cost the Fever at some point. Some of the games that they've lost this year have been because Caitlin Clark turned the ball over too much. It's still a part of her game. It's something that has to be tightened up. I'm sure that it will. Caitlin's a great player, and at some point, she's got to get that part of her game fixed up. In the last game against the Mystic, Kelsey Mitchell, second leading scorer, scored 16 points, 6 of 13 shooting, 3 of 6 from 3. On nights where Aaliyah Boston or Caitlin Clark struggle, she is more than capable of stepping up and scoring the ball more. Very similar to the Pacers, right? On nights where Tyrese Halliburton struggles, they've got, more than just one option of guys who can step up, but maybe it's Nembhard who instead of scoring, 10 points, scores 16. Maybe it's, TJ McConnell who goes nuts for a quarter, right? You have to have these supplementary players that can pick up the slack when your stars struggle, because stars struggle all the time. That's just kind of the way that it goes. And for the Fever, that player that has to step up when Aaliyah Boston or Caitlin Clark struggles is Kelsey Mitchell. And that's what she did the last time that they played the Mystic. Even though Caitlin Clark had a great game, Aaliyah Boston didn't. She only scored 10 points, was 3 of 9 and it was only 3 of 9 from the floor. But it's okay. You can have stinkers when you have other players like Kelsey Mitchell that are capable of picking up the slack. And Mitchell's scoring ability as the third option is a real advantage for the Fever. And when all 3 of the Fever's young, talented players are scoring, they are tough to beat. That's what happened on Sunday. And the Fever offense felt unstoppable, in all honesty. And on top of everything else, the Mystics suck. They aren't a good team. Okay, they are 2-12. Good teams do not start the season 2-12. Bad teams do that. Okay, the Fever had a great chance tonight to improve to 6-10 on the season. That would put them also on a 3-game winning streak, which would be their first winning streak of the year. And if they win tonight, they'll have won 4 out of their last 5 games. They'd also be 4-1 in this important 9-game stretch that they're in. They'd also be 6-4 when they don't play one of the 2 best teams in the WNBA. That is a great start to the season for a young, solid team. And if they can continue to beat the bottom half of the league in these games, then they should make the playoffs. As of right now, they're sitting in that 8 spot. They've played more games than everyone else, so it's kind of tough to tell how many games they're ahead or back and all those things. So let's just win so that we don't have to worry about all that stuff. And as of right now, they are meeting the expectation that Lynn Dunn set for the team on this very radio station before the year started. Lynn Dunn made it clear they wanted to compete for the playoffs. They wanted to compete for the 8th seed. And right now, they're doing that. And it looks very attainable. Now, Caitlin Clark has taken the world by storm. Okay, she is all that anyone can talk about. She is. She's all that anyone can talk about. And at first, when I was sitting down last night and I was prepping out, this monologue and the things that I wanted to say, when I wrote it down first last night, I was going to say that Caitlin Clark had taken over the sports world. But that's not true. She's being talked about by everyone. Fox News, CNN, The Ellen Show, I'm sure, talks about her. The late night talk shows, I'm sure that they talk about her as well. So it's not even just the sports world, and that's because Caitlin Clark is a content machine. All she does is churn out new topics for everyone to talk about. If you want to discuss Caitlin Clark from a sports perspective, you can do that because she's an awesome basketball player. Okay, if you want to talk about her from a race perspective, you can do that if you want. Not my cup of tea, but if that's what you want to do you, big dog. If you want to talk about her from a marketing standpoint, which is, whenever I talk to my boss and I tell him that I'm talking about Caitlin Clark, we immediately start talking about marketing and like how the WNBA is marketing her compared to the NFL, how they market their stars, and how the NBA markets theirs. So like she's just a full-blown content machine. You can talk about her in any way that you want, in all honesty. And now we have to ask this question, how long does this last for? A lot of people are going to tune into her game tonight because she's fun to watch. She's entertaining. She is. And I'm of the opinion that this window of opportunity for the WNBA to capitalize on this fun, entertaining rookie that they have in Caitlin Clark, this window of opportunity to capitalize on that begins to shrink on August 26th and completely shuts on September 5th at 8:20. When those two dates come, people will begin not to care. And September 5th at 8:20, that's the first NFL regular season game of the year. That's when people are locked into football. And they definitely won't care anymore because nothing draws more eyes than the NFL. There isn't a world where a women's basketball player is a bigger story than the start of the NFL season. With that being said, how much more of this nonstop Caitlin Clark news cycle can people take? Here's the thing. We've been able over these past, couple of months to take a break from Caitlin Clark because other things have been happening. The NBA playoffs, right? Like if there's any sort of Caitlin Clark fatigue, you can go find Pacers coverage. You can go find, NBA Finals coverage. You can go find OTA coverage, right? Because that happened earlier this month. During Caitlin Clark's college season at Iowa, we were able to step away and discuss men's college basketball. We were able to talk about Danny Hurley and UConn and Zach Edey and Purdue and them making a Final Four. We were able to talk about how bad IU is and how they can't shoot the ball. None of that's going on right now. We have a month until the start of NFL training camp. We do. If you thought that Caitlin Clark was overcovered, if you thought that she was talked about too much, if you're getting tired of the Caitlin Clark segments, then you are not going to enjoy this next month of sports coverage because she is the only interesting thing going on in the sports world right now. Yes, Major League Baseball is happening. Yes, Paul Skeens is interesting. But let's just be honest, when it comes to baseball, people don't care until the playoffs start for the most part. Okay, like 90% of baseball fans aren't tuning in to game 90 of a 162-game season. It's not happening, especially when the Cubs are as bad as they are, okay? No one wants to sit down on their couch and watch the Cubs blow another save. They don't. And people, because of that, are going to continue to tune into Caitlin Clark like they never have before because for the first time in her career, college or pro, she is the only thing entertaining on TV that people want to watch right now. And this should be a great thing. This should be a great thing for the WNBA. But as we've seen, the WNBA is going to get in their own way. Okay, while the things Angel Reese has said about Caitlin Clark have made the news, now everything said about Caitlin Clark is going to make the news. Okay, I said it about a month ago about how, Caitlin Clark is the most polarizing athlete we've seen since Tim Tebow. Okay, she is. Everybody has an opinion on her, and I still believe that, and places like ESPN and Fox Sports know that. That means the more Caitlin Clark content is coming. It's on its way, and if it's negative and not about basketball, actually, not even the negative part. Like if people want to rip Caitlin Clark, like that's not going to push people away. The content just has to be about basketball. And if it's not, then their window of opportunity, the WNBA's window of opportunity, could close earlier than September 5th. Okay, like there's going to come a point where people get sick and tired of how political the conversation around Caitlin Clark can be. And whenever I discuss Clark, I feel like I'm constantly tiptoeing this line of not talking about race. Because let's be honest, since I am Indianapolis's honesty broker, race has been brought into this by other WNBA players. People don't like it when their politics and their sports mix. Sports and politics are like oil and water. Shake it, stir it up, whatever you want to do. Doesn't mix. It doesn't. Okay, I used to produce a show at a radio station, at a conservative talk radio station here in Indy. And when the host would start talking about sports, it was the worst thing ever. Okay? Because politics in sports taint the very thing that I love and that you likely love. Because chances are you aren't listening to a sports radio show if you don't love sports. When leagues allow their sport to cross into this realm of politics, it never ends well. Remember when the NBA put all the BLM stuff on the court? Crushed their ratings. People didn't watch. The NBA Finals this year had bad ratings, but those ratings weren't as bad as the ones during the bubble where they put BLM on the court. Okay, that was the bubble year. A lot of things lined up for the NBA to have great ratings. They had LeBron James and the Lakers, the biggest brand in basketball, in the finals, but no one watched. Despite it being COVID and everyone being stuck inside watching television all the time. Okay, people binge watched so many things, but you know what they didn't do? They didn't watch the NBA Finals. Okay, the NBA had their biggest star in the sport in the finals since Michael Jordan. And also, that star was in a Lakers jersey, but no one watched because they allowed politics to infiltrate their sport. And consumers didn't like it. So they didn't watch. The WNBA has to be careful. The window of opportunity of capitalizing on Caitlin Clark's rookie season is closing slowly. But the window officially closes on September 5th. Okay, when the regular season starts for the NFL. The WNBA has to be careful as to not allow politics to seep in and ruin people's enjoyment of this rookie season from Caitlin Clark. Speaking of Caitlin Clark, my guy Tony East joining me next segment to talk about her, the Fever, the Siakam extension, and all the things when it comes to professional basketball in the city of Indianapolis. Tony East joining me here in about 4 minutes.
Introducing Rumble Cloud, a platform that supports business freedom and innovation. Are you tired of surprise fees and runaway budgets? Say goodbye to hidden costs and big tech overreach with Rumble Cloud. Stay on budget with fixed monthly pricing and customizable cloud computing packages that fit your business needs. With simple and predictable pricing, we can help you get control of your IT budget. Designed to empower businesses to become independent from vendor lock-in strategies and censorship, Rumble Cloud offers a portfolio of essential cloud computing services to meet your needs. With Rumble Cloud, you can store and access unlimited data types without relying on big tech. Through our independent infrastructure, our products and services are built on trust with our community and welcome everyone to experience a cloud vendor you can truly trust. Your cloud, your freedom. Rumble Cloud, where high performance meets pricing predictability. Visit rumble.cloud to get started.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show, weekdays at 11 a.m. This is Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 a.m., 99.5 HD2, and always. Often imitated, never duplicated. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 a.m. and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. It's Wednesday. It's 11:20, so you know what that means. Tony East, a guy who covers basketball in the city of Indianapolis better than anyone else. Tony, what's going on, man?
Busy morning. Siakam's back with the Pacers. Fever play again later today. Lots to do, but it's been fun.
It has been. Let's start with Siakam re-signing. Like this isn't a surprise, right? Where do you think his biggest impact is going to be next year? Like, I know that we saw him play with the Pacers a lot this year. For me, I think we're going to see the Pacers have more success against the bad teams during the regular season because they have a guy in Siakam. But where do you think his biggest impact kind of comes early next year?
Yeah, I guess you said it's not a surprise. The only thing I would say is 4 years instead of 5 does surprise me a tiny bit, but I think the Pacers will be just fine with that being the result of the actual agreement. In terms of its impact next year, yeah, it's interesting because what happened in the playoffs, he was just such a leader with experience, right? He'd won a title before. He'd been on teams that had come down from 0-2 before, right? All that stuff really mattered and was like a stabilizing presence. And so now that I think they, even beyond the fact that he's a very good player, have like experienced what that looks like, will make them a more mature team next year with him coming back with the group they already have. And now all their starting 5 from last year is under contract once again. And so I think you're right to point out that if they are more mature, I think it was 7 losses against those bottom 4 teams this year, bottom 5, which is, unacceptable even internally. At the same time, they did have a lot of really high quality wins, which may be hard to repeat, but if they can sniff their level of high quality wins from last year and cut out some of those losses, as a more mature elder team that now has expectations to win, which wasn't the case at this time last year. Yeah, I think that is obviously a big thing for them. And of course, the biggest deal is that they are keeping a very good player, probably the best unrestricted free agent they've ever signed, albeit somebody who was on their own team last year.
Still, though, like we will take it. He's a good player who really elevated the floor and the ceiling for the Pacers this year. I think staying with the Pacers, the other contract extension or re-signing that I'm most intrigued by is Obi Toppin. If they re-sign him, any chance that they move Jarace Walker?
I would not if I were them, certainly.
I agree with that.
Of course, there's going to be questions about it, right? Michael Scotto reported in Hoops Hype that rival executives were monitoring, whatever that phrasing always means. But, if they would do that, should Toppin resign. And I get why other teams would think that, right? If you bring in, the same rotation, Jarace probably can't play again in year 2, or at least not without an injury. So, I mean, does he have more value to another team than the Pacers? Maybe. And that always leaves the door open to me to explore the trade market. But I mean, they're high on him. He's a good player. They just have a lot of depth right now. And I think you just keep player rights and figure it out later. And Toppin is a player that they have the rights of and can keep. So he's the most interesting player of the summer left to me. Obviously, there's guys that can sign extensions, but they're not in danger of losing anyone for the coming season. So Toppin right now is the most interesting. But after that, then it becomes, Jarace, Nembhard, McConnell, all those guys.
Yeah, makes sense. Last thing here on the Pacers, once again joined by Tony East, covers both the Pacers and the Fever. So apparently, I think this is more smoke than anything, but apparently OG Anunoby is not happy with the Knicks offer. What are the chances between these 3 options that we see him in a Knicks jersey? What are the chances we see him in a Pacers jersey? And what are the chances we see him in neither? He ends up somewhere else other than Indiana or New York.
Good question. So the reason that this is so fascinating and why I wondered how this would look for Siakam is it's very rare in a summer that a very good team has salary cap space. And that's the 76ers. They are a very good team with 2 all-star level players that has a ton of salary cap space. The reason that's relevant is because any good player who is available as a free agent, Paul George, OG Anunoby, anyone, can now have a ton of leverage with their old team, right? Because they can say, hey, I'll just go to Philly. Like, I'll leave, And so they can pump up an offer if they want. And so the dynamics aren't as they usually are, where it's like, well, you can, if you're a star player, you can either re-sign with your incumbent team or go to some crappy team that has cap space. Like, it's a very unique situation that I think is going to add to a lot of guys' value. And if you're Anunoby, who probably thinks, hey, you just traded a bunch of stuff for me and I'm like the best 3-and-D wing in the NBA. Like, I'm probably worth $35 to $40 million. Pay up, let's go. Or I might sniff around. It's like a thing. It's really fascinating that was reported, because he is repped by the agency that, the agent Leon Rose that now runs the Knicks used to work for. So of course there's always some odd dynamics there. So I'll be curious how that ends up. I would still guess he lands with the Knicks. I'd put that as by far the highest of the three options you presented me. Second would be Philly of all the options available, because they're good and he would fit there very well. In terms of the Pacers specifically, because his contract is way undervalued right now, it's possible, I guess, that there's a sign and trade or opt-in and trade, but it'd be very tricky with the cap rules to pull something like that off for the Pacers. They'd have to include some good players, or pray that he opts in and include a lot of picks. So it's possible, I guess, but pretty low chance to me. So I'd say like 60% Knicks, 30% else. Now that's too low. I'd say like 75% Knicks, 24% Sixers or someone else, 1% Pacers.
Okay. And, if OG ended up here, then I think Jarris Walker would be gone. I do think that they'd move him.
He'd probably be involved in the deal, right?
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense to me.
So we'll see. It's just, it's wishful thinking, but it's June. We can think wishfully at this time, So let's move into the Fever, playing tonight, 7:00 at home. A chance to go on a 3-game win streak, their first win streak of the season, a chance to improve to 4-1 in their last 5. They're starting to kind of figure things out, especially Aaliyah Boston, who, is the WNBA reigning player of the week. Why do you think she's been better in these past couple games?
Yeah, dominant, like winning player of the week. I think he averaged like over 20 and 13 last week. A couple things have really changed. And to be clear, like, this is kind of what I thought she'd look like for much more of this season, right? Like, I think I said this year, like, before the season, I was telling people, I think Caitlin's going to be good, but I think Aaliyah's going to be the best player. Like, she was an all-star last year and, was in contention for Team USA and was in their training camps. And then she started pretty rough. And I asked about it, and she's like, yeah, I don't think I played very well. And she was right. But now she's playing awesome and looking like the player that I thought, and that now I think people understand why she was an all-star last year. Because what they've done a little differently, and what their next step's going to be blending this with what Clark's really good at, but they've been playing through the post more. And it's not always Aaliyah, right? Sometimes it's Melissa Smith too, who's been playing pretty well. But when they play just a tiny bit slower and make sure they get a post touch and then play from there, whether that's from a handoff, whether that's from a pass, a post up, whatever, they get either a better shot for Aaliyah, or just in general, their longer possessions end up being good. And like, that doesn't, it had, like, in the dream game they won, Clark had 7 points. Like, she didn't get good looks in that style that night. But then 3 days later, when they put this high, there were good looks for everybody. Clark got good looks and was awesome. Some called that her best game of the season. Kelsey Mitchell got good. All of their big four were great. So they're playing through the post more. It makes Boston look better. That's why she just won player of the week. And it makes the team kind of make more sense, and it's part of their success. I think the real pivot to this started in the second half against Connecticut. I bet they stick with it until the team figures out how to stop them, because they've been scoring pretty well recently. And of course, the most important part, they're winning some games.
That's right. Joined by Tony East, the man who covers both the Fever and the Pacers. You mentioned meshing Clark and Boston styles. 6 of Clark's 9 assists on Sunday went to Aaliyah Boston, which is awesome. And we love to see that. And when Caitlin Clark was drafted, it was obviously a great thing for the league. And part of that was, like, people are not only going to get to see Caitlin, but they're going to get to see other players. I freaking love Kelsey Mitchell. I love her game. She creates space and generates open looks all the time. And I would say she's probably the third option, right? Like, it's probably Boston and then Clark and then Mitchell. You know the league better than I do. Is she one of the better third options in the league?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she was an all-star for the first time last year, and I think Aaliyah being really good really helped with that because for a while she was the receiver's first option, and that's maybe not where she's at her best. Like you can tell she's a good catch and shoot player, good cutter, but when she's got less attention or can at least like attack to crack the defense, she's very good because she is so fast. It's great. Like the problem with her I have is people who are new to the W like want comps. They want to know like who is this player in the NBA like talent wise. And I've had a lot of trouble with Kelsey Mitchell because she's just so fast and can shoot. And she shot bad to start the season, but like that's very rare. Like all the fast guys in the NBA can't really shoot. I guess Tyrese Maxey, but she's just such a unique player in that way that she blends the shooting and the speed. And now playing with Clark in Boston as a third option, a lot of times when she catches it on the move, the defense is focused on someone else. So she can either just dribble right past somebody or there's like an open pass or she can just flow into something. And so she started the season hurt, but now that she's playing and healthy and stuff, she looks great. And I think you're seeing why she was an all-star last year and should have been, in my opinion, 2 years ago. I'm glad you're enjoying watching her because there's no one that plays like her in basketball, really. Like, again, it's a rare combination of skills. That's what's made her so good and why the Fever have kept her all these years, even when they've stunk, because she's good and should be a part of their next good team.
She should be. Like you said, she's awesome. She's so much fun to watch. And look, Tony, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you about Caitlin Clark, right? Like she is the main attraction. Yeah. She's kind of starting to figure things out. She's still a little up and down. What to you has been the most impressive part about her just in general this year? Is it the way that she's kind of dealt with the media? Is it the way that she shot the ball? What has kind of been the thing that's stuck out to you the most about Caitlin Clark so far this year?
Yeah, she's just really upbeat all the time. And I think that is because she's very good at keeping perspective on her life. I think that's what's kind of impressed me the most. Like maybe she expected all this or is cool with all this. So I can't imagine like 2 years ago, I'm from Iowa, I'm planted Iowa, I'm pretty good. And like, I like that. And then all of a sudden 2 years later, I have like a security guard, and,
yeah.
And I mean, it's like, what happened in the 2 years? It's like no one could have possibly seen this coming. And so to just like, she always, obviously she's frustrated when they lose. Like if you watch her play, she's pretty emotive when she or someone else messes up, right? She very much cares about basketball and winning and shows it. But when she is public facing or when she is dealing with fans or anything like that, she always matches the right attitude to me. And I think that could be pretty hard with how much her life has changed, with how important of a figure she's become, with basically being a team spokesman 24/7. Like that could be pretty overwhelming. A lot of players end up, and I bet she will, like detesting media and like being that kind of figure, but she's handled it so well. She's been so upbeat the whole time. And so from a basketball perspective, I think you can tell how she's gotten better and has started to read the W game with the better players. I just wrote about that last week. But I think the most impressive thing has been that to me. And the next thing for her will be stringing together a few like awesome games in a row. She had the 30-pointer when they beat the Sparks in LA. She had the 30-pointer when they beat the Mystics in DC. She just had almost a triple-double when they beat the Sky. Like a couple of those in a row. Because she told me after that Sparks game, like she hadn't felt like she had that breakout game yet. So I'll be curious what she thinks a breakout game is. And I'll be curious if she can have a couple, oh, wow, Caitlin looks awesome games in a row.
How long do you think this much attention, like how long do you think Caitlin Clark can hold this level of like people's attention on her? Like, do you think this goes away at some point? Like, how long do you think this infatuation with Caitlin Clark lasts?
I honestly think it depends on how they handle this current stretch of their schedule, because we talked about it on this show twice now. It is such a relevant part of their season how crazy their first 11 games were, not only in terms of the frequency, but they played Connecticut and New York 3 times, right? Like those teams are 25-3 now. It's not a surprise they went 0-6 against those teams. I only bring that up because they're 5-4 against everybody else. Like they're playing well, and I reference all that in terms of Clark because if they have a good record or like a good enough record, or they're like in a playoff position, you have to imagine people are going to keep watching all the time. And so they're currently in 8th, and they play the Mystics tonight, who stink and are banged up, and the Fever could very well lose. They lost the Sparks at home, but if they win that, they're 6-10. They're again firmly in 8th and climbing, and the Wings end up, the Sparks stink and the Sky are meh. Like, there's a chance they could cling to that 8th and even climb higher. That's what it would take to me, is them being good, because at some point the new player syndrome wears off until that player takes off. And my reference for that would be Wembanyama, who was, the darling of the NBA for, 15 games. And everybody's like, wow, the Spurs suck. And then nobody really watched them again until, I'm making this up, but February, because in that time he started playing center and was just unbelievable. Like, he was like an all-star level player for the last 2 months of the season. And then people the Spurs again. So either if the Fever stay good or stay in a playoff spot, or their record's good, I think people will keep watching. If that doesn't happen and they kind of stumble in this next stretch, then I think you might see some interest fade until Clark starts doing what I mentioned a minute ago, which is, 25 and then one game and then 28 the next, and then 24 the next. And then people are like, oh, wow, I really want to see what's going on there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Two more questions for you, Tony, and then I will let you go. Joined by Tony East, who covers both the Fever and the Pacers. A lot of thoughts on Twitter about Christy Sides and how she's done this year. What have your thoughts been on her coaching?
Yeah, this is about the record I thought they'd have. If anything, 5-10. I said they'd be 2-8 after 10, and they were. They've won 4 of their last 6, so I think they're about where I thought they'd be right now in terms of their record. Some things have been maybe a little better than I thought, like their offense in particular. As they've had some good stuff there, and Alyssa Smith's development on offense looks good. Some things have looked a lot worse. Their defense is obviously the feature of that discussion, and that's relevant because she was hired to be a defensive coach, right? She talked about it when she was hired. Lynn Dunn talked about she was hired, and so on one hand, in terms of like the coach that's meeting your expectations and is doing good stuff and gives you confidence that this team can build into a winner, yeah, she's done it there. I think she's done a fine job. She has personally, to me, done what I would expect in terms of the results and what this team has been. In terms of the way it's happened, there's been like Emmy Fagbenley's been great. That was really unexpected, and Sides deserves a lot of credit for that. There's been some stuff that's gone better than I thought in meaningful ways. Christy Wallace starting and being a good defender, like that's a change I didn't expect. But their defense not being good is certainly a mark on the resume. So I would say fine. About the job I would expect from her on the aggregate, with some better than I thought, some worse. I'm very surprised people talk about her job as much as they do, because I just don't think that if she could get fired this year, I think expectations were too high. Like they're at best the 7th best team in the league, and if you're the 8th best instead, like, should your coach get fired? To me, the answer is obviously no. So maybe people disagree with that because they thought this team would be awesome, and I guess that's on them. But I did not agree with that, and I think they've been about what I expected this season.
I'm with you. Teams that are really young usually don't win. For no matter how talented they are. Like, it's just kind of the way it goes in every sport. Last question, and I will let you go. So as I've watched the Fever this year, they feel so much like the Pacers. Like, there are so many similarities. Have you noticed this?
Yeah, I totally understand that. Like, play fast, suck at defense, point guard that's like crazy passer, really good long-range shooter, blending those skills. They have a lot of stuff that kind of mirrors that in terms of big picture and style. They almost remind me of the Pacers like last year, or maybe even like that month after they traded for Halliburton in 22-23, where it's like, ooh, they have all these good young pieces and this style is really cool, but they're not any good yet. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Like last year's Pacers, I think they got eliminated from the playoffs in like their 3rd to last game when they won 35. Maybe that's what this Fever team is, maybe a tick above that. So I totally get those comps, right, of the young ascending team with a flashy passer and an up-tempo style, and like, wow, they could score 100 any night. But I think they're like a year and a half behind where the Pacers are in terms of success, and I think they'll take that. If they make the conference finals a year and a half, I think the Fever would be thrilled.
I think everyone would be thrilled. That'd be great.
That's right.
Tony, thanks for your time, man. You were always great.
Of course, thanks for having me.
See you, man. That was Tony East. Follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East. Just does great stuff, writes good stuff, covers both the Fever and the Pacers. So he's in a busy time of the year. We always appreciate him making time for us. Last segment of the show coming up here in about 4 minutes, getting into a little wrapping up the NBA season, and we're going to touch on the Colts as well. That is coming up here in about 4 minutes.
Are you an annoying coworker? Sending emails when everyone else is sleeping? Do they ask, how do you sleep at night? Then you should go to Mattress Firm. They have knowledgeable sleep experts that can help you find a better bed, like a Tempur-Pedic. It has technology to keep you cool at night, meaning anyone, even people like you, can sleep. Get matched at Mattress Firm. Sleep at night. Restrictions apply. See store or website for details.
When life spells heartburn, how do you spell relief? R-O. Yes.
Fourth cup of coffee?
Still R-O-L-A-I-D-S.
Extra cheesy pizza?
Rolaids always spells relief. Rolaids' powerful dual-active formula begins neutralizing acid on contact to fight your heartburn fast. So, when life spells heartburn, Rolaids spells relief. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hope you're having a great day. No Dan Dockett show today. Let me remind the world of that really quickly. He is off today, tomorrow, and Friday. So if you want your fix of great Indianapolis local sports radio, make sure you're tuned in right here to the Real Jonathan Smith Show every day from 10 to noon. You can also watch on YouTube. Just head over there, search for Indy's Sports Ticket, and you'll find us. Subscribe, hop in, join the chat, do all of those fun things. The chat always winds up in some way, shape, or form talking about the Indianapolis Colts. So, let's talk about the Colts. Let's talk about Chris Ballard. Let's be optimistic. Let's be hopeful because it's June, and I really don't want to be negative for the next 2.5 months as we wait for the NFL regular season to actually start. Colts reportedly turned down an opportunity to trade down to the 19th pick with the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams offered a trade to move up to pick number 15. In return, they would give the Colts the 19th pick and several other picks later on in the draft. And Colts obviously said no. Instead, they decided to draft Laiatu Latu, defensive end, edge rusher out of UCLA. And freaking love that guy. Jeez, I'm so excited for Laiatu Latu. I think he's going to be a good player. So now I have to ask this question. Does the Colts saying no to that pick mean that they legitimately love Laiatu Latu? Did they legitimately have him as the number one defender, number one player on their board at that time? I would say that it does. Because if they didn't love him as much as they say that they did when they drafted him, then they very easily could have traded down to 19 and drafted a cornerback, maybe taking Dallas Turner, edge rusher coming out of Alabama. Instead, though, they opted to stay put at 15 and draft Laiatu Latu. For most teams, this wouldn't be a big deal. but we know how much Chris Ballard relishes the opportunities to trade down and accumulate more draft picks. Because according to him, it's a lottery, and the more chances you have, the better chances you have of finding a star. That's not true. That's flawed logic because the better players are at the top. That's just how it works. And so I also know that Ballard's famous for saying that he loves whoever they pick. Okay, I can't believe this guy was available. Incredible. Could it actually be true this time? Him turning down the trade, and there's clear excitement from him when they drafted Latu. Like, could Chris Ballard actually be telling the truth in terms of they thought this guy was great when he was at UCLA? Could he actually be telling the truth when he said that he was surprised that Latu was still on the board? It's interesting. Like, it might be true this time. And I hope that it is, because rookie minicamp for everyone that plays for the Colts starts on July 24th. Both rookies and veterans will be there. Some teams opted to have rookies report a few days early. Colts aren't doing that. They aren't. So I'm going to read between the lines here. Just a smidge. Just a smidge. Like, they had rookie minicamp earlier this month, right? They had them report early before OTAs. That's normal. Every team does that. I feel like if the rookies had struggled in any way, shape, or form, they would have had them report early as well for actual minicamp. For example, if AD Mitchell was struggling to understand the offensive install, if he didn't understand why they were running the route trees that they were running, all those things, if he struggled with that, I feel like the Colts would have had rookies report early, because AD Mitchell is going to play a role in this Colts offense this year. Or if, Laiatu Latu was struggling with understanding the defensive scheme that Gus Bradley was running, then they probably would have had the rookies come in early, because those two guys specifically should play roles this year for the Colts. Like, I don't know about you, but like Laiatu Latu, you take him 15th overall, he better be a week one starter. AD Mitchell, with as much as he has been talked up by everybody, I expect for him to play, start in week one, and have an impact. But they aren't having them report early. So does that mean that they feel confident in these guys? Does it mean that, like, we should be a little bit more excited about them? Because, look, if they weren't understanding and grasping things properly, then they would undoubtedly have had them come in early. They aren't doing that, though. Okay? Now, to be fair, maybe I'm reading into things a little bit too much. Okay, they didn't have rookies report early last year. This might just be a Shane Steichen thing where he, for whatever reason, doesn't like or think that rookies should have to report early. Right? I mean, it's up to him when it comes to this kind of stuff. So it's nice to be optimistic. I'm going to roll with the rookies looked awesome at voluntary OTAs. And so they're like, no, they don't need to come in early. Maybe that's like a bribing thing where they're like, hey, if you guys play well and look good during voluntary OTAs, then hey, you guys won't have to come in early. Otter Creek chiming in saying that Chris Ballard is telling the truth. He's simply incompetent. Incompetent is a strong word. I think there are worse GMs out there than Chris Ballard. I do. Look, like the truth of the matter when it comes to the Colts is they've never been bad, which tells you something. For me, incompetent would be the Colts have been, 5-12 the past several years, and for some reason he's still here. That's not who the Colts have been. They've hovered around 500. That means they're average. It means that he is competent. He's just not great at his job. And that's what people are waiting on, right? Like, no one wants to root for a football team where, they're average. No one wants to root for a football team that's boring. They don't. Like, that's not fun. Okay? Look, I grew up a Dolphins fan. We were either bad or boring every year of my life for a long time. Okay? Rooting for a boring or a bad football team isn't fun. Okay? And having to follow a guy like Grigson, who I believe was the GM when the Colts won the Super Bowl, that could be wrong. But following a guy like that who had a lot of success isn't easy. And there are plenty of areas where we can pick apart what Chris Ballard has done wrong. But look, To say that he's a bad GM or to say that he's incompetent is just wrong. He's been average, and average isn't okay in sports because every sports fan expects and wants for their team to compete for championships. They do. That is the expectation no matter where you go. People don't want to hear about, oh, but we're in a small market. People don't want to hear about, oh, but we're in the salary cap. People don't want to hear about, oh, but so-and-so got hurt. People don't want to hear about that. They don't. And look, being average in the world of sports, it's never been good enough, and it never will be. There's not a fan base in the world that's going to, well, maybe the Colts, I don't know. There's not a fan base in the world, though, that's content with, oh, we went 9-8 and we barely missed the playoffs. Darn, maybe next year. That doesn't exist. Maybe the Chargers fan base. That fan base, it doesn't exist, but they might be okay with 9-8 and barely missing the playoffs because they don't care about it down there. But when you're in a city, in the Midwest or in the South, two regions of the country that really care about football, being average, just being competent and all those things, not good enough. Never has been, never will be. So when it comes to Chris Ballard, to call him incompetent, I would say is wrong. But to call him a Super Bowl level GM would be even more wrong, if that makes sense. That's going to do it for the Real Jonathan Smith Show today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from noon to 3. No Dan Dockich today. Jim Rome Show, that is what is running up. That's what's going to run here whenever I finish up. Thanks for tuning in. I always appreciate it. Subscribe to the YouTube. We will, just search for us at Indies Sports Ticket. All of those things. I'm not on until 3 today. 5 hours that's a lot of radio, man. That's a lot of radio. So I'm done wrapping up here in about 30 seconds. Thanks again for tuning into the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll be back on the air again tomorrow from 10 to noon. No Dan Dockich today, tomorrow, or Friday. So if you want a taste of great local sports radio, tune in right here, the Real Jonathan Smith Show from 10 to noon. I'll be back again tomorrow, 10 to noon. Can't wait. Hopefully you're able to tune in. Last time, go subscribe to the Indies Sports Ticket YouTube page and watch the live stream. The chat is just a great place to spend your time. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.